Hey, and welcome to another episode of An Ordinary King. So today, how exciting, today's guest is Tansel Ali, who I'm pretty pumped on having on, just as I'm pumped about having everyone on. I've got really cool guests. But Tansel is a 4-time Australian memory champion. A memory champion. He's like won championships. They do memory championships. I didn't know they did that, but now I do, and I think it's pretty mad. Tansel does presentations to thousands of people in the world on how best to use their memory so they can learn faster, they can achieve goals and just be more successful and just better off in life. In fact, he's actually successfully remembered 2 Yellow Pages phone books. So Yellow Pages phone books, so the two big books. He did that in 24 days. And if you don't know what they are, they're just big fucking books. There are lots of shit, lots of numbers in there, so well done, bro. He's also the international best-selling author of 2 books, The Yellow Elephant and How to Learn Almost Anything in 48 Hours. And who does not want to learn almost anything in 48 hours? I do, hands up. Tansel spends most of his time coaching, mentoring and running events and just helping people make the most out of their brain and their minds and just being better people. In the podcast today, we chatted about the power of the mind and memory and how people might be losing touch with it and the importance that it plays in pretty much everything that we do. And if we just spend just a little bit more time on improving our memory, our lives will be better off because of it, I think. Look, I had a really good chat with him. I really enjoyed him. He's funny, he's quick, he's witty, he's intelligent, and here he is, Tansel Ali.
Amazing.
Hey, bro.
How you doing?
Thanks for jumping on the show. I've been really excited about having you on.
Yeah, I'm excited about being on. I mean, you've set up quite extraordinary here, and it seems like you really mean business. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of gear, but it's not really. It packs all neatly down into. I've got like a hard case, which it all packs down into. You're
like a Jetson. You just pop everything into a case and off you go.
George
it's like
Jetson.
There's nothing to see here.
Crazy. I was really excited about having you on for a while because ever since I saw a post that you did. And so I did a bit of a research, a bit of a sneak peek into your profile, and then your internet, and just checking up on who you were and your accolades and
your criminal record.
Your criminal record that wasn't hard to find, by the way. You just got to dig deep.
Just got to go to Crime Stoppers episode
696, I think it was. And then I thought how fascinating, and someone that specializes in memory, and then. How applicable it is to everyone's lives, and then how unconscious people are, I think, to the necessity of memory and how important it plays, that role facilitates in people's lives. And I just have a myriad of questions that in relation to that and where we go with it, and I just wanted to gauge your opinion and your insights.
Sure, let's have a conversation around it.
Love to. So let's start off by talking about who you are and where you started and why you went into memory.
Yeah, how I started was I was actually a skeptic of memory improvement because I always thought I had a bad memory, and I just took it as a given. Right, I used to watch a lot of late night TV back in the day. So your Dave Lettermans, and actually he was the only one. And I used to see these people on the show memorizing all these audience names and faces, and long list of numbers and words. And I always thought, no, these guys are just fake. They just want to sell their tapes. It was cassette tapes back then. That was the in thing. And no, don't believe it. I've got a really crappy memory. No chance. And then a friend of mine comes up to me one day and says, Tansel, I can remember 40 random object back to front, whatever. Just test me out. I'm like, yeah, right, you can. Like those guys on TV. He said, yeah, sure. I'm like, all right. So I test him out, and he memorizes everything perfectly. And I'm like, hang on, this it's got to be a trick, surely. So I'm
Were they his objects?
Sorry?
Were they his objects?
No, I just gave sort of random words, off the top of my head, and he got them all. I'm like, So I'm still trying to look around the room, or we're in his bungalow, looking around. I was like, what the hell's going on? Did I, am I recording something? Like, what's going on? This was pre-smartphone era. And I was like, no, it's just memory techniques. I'm like, what the hell you mean memory techniques? This could have been useful when I actually went to uni. And he goes, no, I just got it from a book. I'm like, well, what's the book's name? And he couldn't remember.
The irony is striking.
Yeah, so anyway, I found out about memory techniques, and I went straight to Google, as you do. Google was still big back in the day, and all these websites came up for memory improvement and training your memory, and showed a few techniques here and there. So I tried them, and I thought, wow, this stuff actually works. So I went and started reading more about memory. I mean, I couldn't even read. Like, I was terrible at reading, but one of the books I got was for speed reading. And once I actually got in there and understood how memory worked, I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool stuff. It actually works. I mean, I thought it's no fake thing, right? So as I'm Googling and getting excited about memory, I came across the Australian Memory Championships, and I said to my friend, look, let's enter it. We'll come last. Who cares? We're just a bunch of guys playing guitar in metal bands. What do we know, type of thing. We're going to be up against all these nerds, in quotes, all right? So we entered this competition, and lo and behold, I came second in Australia, and my friend came third, and we broke all these memory records. And I'll say to myself, how the hell did this happen? I've still got a crappy memory. I've just tried techniques, and now I'm, almost top of the world. Like, what's going on? And then obviously media hear about it and stuff, and everything goes viral. And suddenly, next thing you know, we're on TV talking about, memory and all this sort of stuff. So that's how it eventuated from there.
Sounds very accidental. Sounds like you just sort of fell into that stratosphere, into that little rabbit hole. You didn't even know you were sort of there, and you woke up in Alice in Wonderland. Yeah,
I mean, I just posted something on LinkedIn today saying how bad my memory was for remembering conversations.
Sure.
People would talk to me, and I'm like, moments later saying, what did you say again? That's how bad I was, and this was in my early 20s. So, it affected me at work, affected me at home.
Did it affect you at school when you were going through school? Was that something that you...
Well, with school, the way that it affected me was I couldn't really contribute in class discussions or anything like that, because I was still trying to figure out what was being said and process. So I never asked questions. I always kept quiet. I took a lot of notes, but how often do you spend rereading your notes and going back, things like that? I mean, you only do that just day before the exam. Right?
Yeah, I never actually through school. I never took notes at all. My backpack, which was like this giant bright orange like basketball, I think it was a Hornets backpack. I had this giant shoulder duffel bag, bright orange bloody bag, that all it ever had in it was like a loaf of bread, a couple of pieces of paper and a pencil.
I think that's all you need for school.
That's what I had. That's all I had. I never had any books, or never did any homework, but I never took notes. It was just never. It's interesting. I just wasn't paying attention. I was good at it, really good at school, but I just never paid attention to it.
Yeah, and it is about attention as well, and being mindful, and
sure.
And sometimes it's not just about memory as well. But when these factors come in, a lot of people just say, "I've just got a terrible memory." And
do you think that's a fallback thing that people like, just an automated response people have, not actually being a memory issue, but just they think that it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a client once come to me saying, look, I've got a terrible memory, and the more I questioned them to find out what was going on, it was because they weren't getting sleep. Right?
That's it.
So, and I said, well, okay, listen to me, go to bed at this time, wake up at this time, get some sleep. A week later, they come up to me and say, oh my goodness, Tansel, my memory, it's come back for some reason. What happened? I'm like, no shit.
How much sleep was this? What was this dude getting? Like 4 hours a night?
Oh, it's like not even 2 hours or something ridiculous.
That's absurd though.
Yeah, so, things like that, even environments, like they might be in a stressful situation.
Sure,
you can have the greatest memory techniques in the world, but if you're stressed out, I mean, that's going to have an impact, right? Or physical illness or things like that, play a part. So it's about knowing what to do in your circumstance rather than just keep blaming your memory.
Do the remedies for these kinds of situations, are they generally like quite obvious remedies, and they just need someone to point them out, or are they genuine sort of tip hacks that experienced people know?
Yeah, look, it depends. Like some people come and they generally have a memory problem, like they could have concentration issues and all that sort of stuff. So they need further training to build up that muscle.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So I look at memory training as exactly the same as physical training. Like if you go to the gym, you don't expect a six pack straight away, right? So you know that there's,
I don't know,
maybe for yourself, because you're already looking like you got a six pack.
I surf.
Right?
I surf.
There you go.
It's more of a 3-pack.
Yeah, but for most people, it's not going to be the case, right? They're going to have to put some sort of effort to get there. For someone like you, it might take you a week, right? But for someone else, it might take a bit longer. In any case, you still have to put in effort to get there. Whereas other things like, let's say, remembering names or numbers or, little things like that. I know I say little, remembering names, people, that's sometimes that's all they want to do. There's just techniques around it, and once you know those techniques, you can actually go and apply them straight away and get the result. Whereas again, people come to me for reading, improving their reading, and I show them speed reading. Now that's sort of in between. Some people get it straight away, some people take a bit longer. So it really depends on the person's effort, how much they're willing to change as well. Discipline, yeah.
And does learning techniques also apply to it? So the way that people learn, because people learn in different ways. They have their mind and their body works in different processes, doesn't it? Where they absorb information differently. Does that apply to it as well?
Well, I think it's independent of that. I know this is sort of controversial to say, but people learn almost like, let's say we look at information, right? It's just data. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? It only makes sense to us if we get an image of that data. So for example, if I read something, it's a contract, right? Terms and conditions. And it says, you have to sign the contract by such and such date. That's just a statement, right? If I put that in a visual sense, right, I have to think of, okay, what's the date? Is it August? Okay, I can say my mum's birthday's in August. So there's you're putting an attachment there and a contract. What does it look like? Is it this massive thing? Like you can exaggerate in your mind, right?
Sure.
And you're writing with a fountain pen. So now you're creating images around that content. And as soon as you start putting images, you can now remember it. It's almost like you're watching it like a movie.
Sure.
Right? So that's the whole idea behind speed reading, is what can you visualize and what can you essentially take out as an image, because that's what's going to help you remember it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So then it's just coupling those two things together, and that's just practice and time and discipline and work.
That's right.
And becoming like a muscle, like a muscle memory.
Almost. And this comes back to that learning part is people learn by encoding, right? This data. So that's what it is. When you go to school or when you go to work or something like, you're presented with data. It's like, okay, how do I encode this as an image? And then if I want to memorize it, how do I make a story from that image, right? Memorization is just story making. That's all it is, storytelling. So when we memorize numbers, when we memorize names, whatever it is, we're making a story. So for example, if someone wants to remember my name, someone could say Tansel, right? So they suddenly got an image. Right now, in order to have a story, maybe someone put tinsel around my head and put me on a Christmas tree. Right. So that's a little narrative. Now, that's how you remember a name. That's how you remember anything, really, by creating a story. So when it comes to learning, all you really have to do is know how to encode, and then know how to make a story from that.
And by encode, you don't necessarily mean like computer encoding.
What encoding means, you take something that's meaningless and you create an image, something that means something to you from it. Whereas decode is you break it down. So it could be an image, you're breaking it down into chunks of whatever.
Okay, and can that process get like a little bit hazy and a little bit crossed over and washy and complex, where people start breaking that memory process down too much?
It actually makes it easier.
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're taking something that's already broken down and you're forming an image from it. So that means you're making it a lot easier. So Tansel doesn't mean
stronger connections.
So for example, Tansel doesn't mean anything for anyone. It's like, well, what the hell's going on, right, with my name? But if you say tinsel, suddenly people have a connection now because they know what tinsel is.
They have an image of it.
Or if they don't know tinsel, they might know Hansel and Gretel or whatever. Like any association like that, right? Or someone yelling out, "Hey, you Tansel!" I've got that before as well.
I actually remembered your name. I was talking to someone yesterday about you, and then the first image that popped into my head was Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Associate someone that you know as well. Another powerful strategy. Yeah. So, you're taking something you don't know and creating something you know with it. So now
Sure.
all you've got now is you've got an image. Now you can play with it and make a story and narrative,
Right.
and you'll remember it for good. So it actually makes the process a lot easier. So when there's people out there studying a whole heap of information, right, that information doesn't make any sense. All you have to do is, okay, what can I create sense of? Right? How do I create images? And then all you have to do is visualize those images to get a better understanding. If you need to memorize, you make a story.
All right.
Yeah.
Right on. So, sort of breaking away from the technical aspects of it and how it sort of works. Is there something going on this day and age with needing to remember things? Is that becoming? Do you think that's becoming less of a necessity in life, where people like don't need to remember as much shit as they used to?
Yeah, look, very good question, because we always talk about technology and remembering and
Yeah.
Google and all these type of things, and back in the day I remember everyone used to remember phone numbers. Now it's just you don't need
This
to.
was something I was going to bring up. I
Yeah.
still remember the phone number that I had from when I was a kid, but
Yeah.
I couldn't remember your phone number or anyone else's. I remember my partner's phone number. She's got a really easy one, but I can't. Phone numbers, I'm just like, I've got contacts list now.
Yeah. I mean, we've got phones, we've got computers, we've got stuff that stores that already, so we don't have to essentially memorize numbers.
Is that a problem?
The question is, is it a problem? Like, what are we actually missing out on? The way
Yeah.
that we were memorizing numbers, we weren't really using memory techniques anyway. We were doing repetition, right? Repetition isn't necessarily memory techniques. Now, it is a form of remembering, but it's very ineffective
Why?
as well. And the reason is you can repeat as much as you want and you can still forget, because it doesn't get locked away into a folder. Let's say computers, you have folders,
Yeah.
right? When you're using memory techniques, you're creating those folders and you can put the information in and walk away. And then at any point in time, all you have to do is go to that folder and retrieve information. When you're just repeating something, right, you might get it then and there, the number. Now, sometimes we have it embedded in us because we've gone through it in our head so many times, but in reality, we don't repeat over and over like we used to. So what happens is that information goes into the cloud in your head, and it's just whenever you're trying to retrieve it, you go, hang on, where are you? I've got no address to go to retrieve, so I have to go back and repeat over and over again. So
Do you know
not
why that
effective.
is? Do you know why that's not as effective doing that?
There's no holding spot for the information. It's like saying to someone, come to Australia. The next thing they're going to ask is, well, to what address? Where do you live? Right? Information doesn't ask that. It just goes into the brain, and your brain goes, hang on, where are you? Information.
Crazy, because that's something that I think I want to come back to that, because I have really specific questions that are directly related to what exactly you're talking about there, but I think those questions will pull us away from where I was initially trying to go with, like, the problem with technology, or if it is a problem with technology and memory, and if that, because one of the things I want to talk about is instinct and knowledge, and how that plays in the world, like, so I think of memory, like when someone says to me memory, I think there's things that I think it's broken into two categories. I'm not studied, and this is my personal. One is like, I guess you could surmise it as like conscious memory, like things like keys, wallet, people's names, stuff that's necessary, like first contact, important. And then there's like, I have what's called like instinct memory, where you're like, that something's bad for you, flames, even if you haven't necessarily had a connection with that, or like you haven't been burnt, but that flame's hot, hopefully. Is there something that's happening with technology as people are losing the connections with memory and the importance of memory, where we're losing stuff that helps us get through life at a base level?
I don't think much has changed, to be honest. The only thing that's changed is that technology's improved, but we haven't, right? And that's because we're not using these memory strategies of storytelling with abstract data. We know how to storytell with art form, because that is art in itself. So if we were to make music or do a painting or something like that, we're using that creative side already. But the trick is to use that side of the brain to connect to the side of the brain that's just all abstract data. And that's where the memory training comes in. So what's happening is that because not many people are doing that, they're sort of outsourcing their brains to technology or whatever, and thinking, hang on, the problem is technology. You know, that's causing us not to remember, because we're now putting all this data and information onto these devices, where in reality they're not using their brains by, you know, connecting one side to the other. And that could be done, you know, how we exercise by doing certain things, and we play sports, all that sort of stuff. Well, what are we really doing for our brain? Right, we're not really doing anything. You know, those games of Sudoku and apps and stuff, they don't do anything. It's more about finding out, well, how can I really train my brain so that I can actually catch up to technology, right? Yeah, that's how that sort of works.
Do you find that, is that something that you feel like is a really critical step that needs to happen?
Absolutely. I mean, I see myself as a memory trainer, just like a physical trainer. And, you know, people come to me to be able to do practical stuff like remember names and speaking without notes and all that sort of stuff. But what I do with them first and foremost is just train their brain, give them drills and exercises, even things like memorizing numbers, cards, things that are just meaningless, almost like a Mr. Miyagi type thing. Like, why the hell am I doing this?
Why am I painting this?
Yeah, why am I painting the sense? Yeah. So that's what it's about. But it's more about training and making sure that encoding is working really quickly, because what happens is you look at a piece of data and you might think, and then get an image, and then think, and then make a story to remember it, right? The trick is to be able to look at a data and then just get it in your head straight away, right? The quicker that happens, that means you're processing a lot faster, you're encoding faster. So that's what training the memory does. And if you can encode faster, then you can be more creative, you can solve more problems, you can make better decisions, you can actually be a better leader because you've got a stronger vision now, and you know exactly how to communicate to people because of how the encoding process works, even for others. Right, so it's things like, you know, creating PowerPoint slides. A lot of people use it wrong because they just, you know, have all these words there and, you know, dot by dot by dot, and
it's boring as bad shit.
It's boring. Why? Because it's a whole bunch of words that's not an image yet in people's minds. Right, so if you cut down those points and you talk in images, you actually tell the story, people engage. It's the same content, but all you're doing is getting people to get direct access.
Yeah, it's a different sense. You're using a different oh my god, you're using a different sensory like they're using their eyes and rather than hearing, I guess, because when you see words, this is probably a silly question, but when you see words written, are you hearing it?
No, here's the thing. It's actually a really good question. I see the word, like you can see the word, but the trick is to actually visualize it. So as a memory athlete, I guess what our that's what we do. We enter competitions, and as athletes, what we do is as soon as we see words or numbers, we see it immediately as an image.
Sure.
Right. And when I say image, it's not the actual shape of the number or anything like that. Like 17 might be a dog, right? 71 might be a cat. This is pre-memorized from before.
Sure.
Right. So if I see a word, like let's say table, I immediately see a table in my head.
Do you when you send emails, do you write in dingbats?
No. I've never had that question before.
Zing. Popping cherries.
Yeah. I write in Comic Sans.
Oh well, it's just as good actually. I think it's that answers the question is why it's important for people to remember shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, look, I don't care about this stuff really, my memory is good, but what you're doing by training, it's like exactly the same as physical. It's like, I don't need to train for physical, but what it's doing to your body is it's keeping you healthy and a healthy mind as well when you train physically. So we know what training the body physically does. There's been so much research, there's been so many case studies, we see it everywhere, but for the brain, no one really knows what training actually does. Yes, there's been research and stuff, and we know that it makes you more creative, all that sort of stuff, but there's still a lot of research being done on training.
Why do you think that people haven't focused on it as much as, say, gut health or eyesight, or, you know, why are we not focusing on this?
Yeah, I think even gut health is, you know, people are starting to get into it now as well, because I've had gut issues for years. I mean, you know, they've cut me up open from chest all the way down, and I have 31 staples, and, you know, they took parts of my intestines out.
Holy shit.
So this was, you know, just when I started, you know, memory training, and they said, look, if you didn't have the operation, you would have been dead, type of thing. So, gut stuff is very, very important to know as well, and that's a really, really good part of understanding how the brain works, because
they're linking it. Yeah, they're linking it a lot at the moment. There's a lot of research going into gut health, like with the microbiome, and mental health, and I mean, there's that old saying, you are what you eat, but they're only just starting. Well, it's funny that they're studying it and they feel like, we're just starting to understand it, but it's like one of those things that you feel like you know it already. You know what I mean? It's kind of,
you feel it in your gut.
Yeah. Well, snaps up there. Well,
that was a good one, wasn't it?
That's a dad joke if I ever heard one.
Got to feel those dad jokes going on.
You got to slide them in there. I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, I think so. It is important, but why is it? Why are people not focusing on it? Why is it not as much study done on this? And
I think it's still. I mean, it's a relatively new area. I think anyway, because when you look at it, 20, 30, 40 years, it's still not that long in the context of the whole world, from thousands of generations. So. It's about trying to understand what's going on in actual everyday life. Everyday life changes. Now we've got technology.
Yeah.
So it's about finding out, how does my brain work accordingly, and how can I keep improving?
Do you feel that they're going to miss out on this though? Do you feel like they're not going to look at it as much because that people are more interested in the now with technology, and that's why people focus on technology, is because it's available now and they can use it, where memory, you need to work at learning how to use it. But technology, once the technology upgrades, I can grab my bloody phone and I can search something. Do you know what I'm saying? Versus like, so do you think that's why they're not focusing on it? Because technology is more immediate?
Yeah, it is, and it's going to get more and more immediate, because you've got like AI and all this sort of stuff. Like, you just have to ask your phone and, it'll give you the answer straight away, instead of you sort of searching around and stuff like that. And so it's really, really powerful stuff. But I think what people miss the point on training your brain and your memory is that you get more creative. What can you do with technology now? So you're going to innovate that technology that you've outsourced your brain to. You're going to, once you get mentally fit, you might think of other problems and solutions and jobs that were never going to happen.
Do you find that a hard sell?
Not necessarily, because
do you find it more like people that seeking you out rather than you seeking them out?
Because the thing that I try and sell is the impact if people don't do it, right? And if people don't train their brain, right, then they'll be almost slaves to technology, or just essentially living like robots, right? Because that's what it is if you don't use your brain. Now, if you do use your brain, then you'll start analyzing the world a bit more. So you'll look at education systems, you'll look at the political system, and you'll start really thinking for yourself. So you've got this more free thinking, you're analyzing, reflecting, you're meditating on the world. And, people don't know this, but memory is extremely helpful in the mental health area, right? Mental health it's a growing problem, right? And how memory helps is, and we talked about this, the story making ability that's what makes memory. Now, if someone's stressed or has anxiety, what happens is they've got stories in their heads, right? And experiences already of that situation. Now, if you've developed your memory, what you can do is you can change that narrative in your head, right? You can create a new one that's even more powerful and distract yourself from the previous, or you can totally get rid of it altogether by using those techniques. Now, this is what I've been doing for the past few years, is working the mental health space, introducing memory techniques so that people can change their thinking and thought processes. And once people change their thinking, their actions change.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's why it's extremely powerful in mental health, in everything that's action related, because once you change that mental space, everything else changes.
Is there a relation between memory and habit?
Habit is it's a physiological thing. So once you're, like dendrites go through the brain, and if you keep doing it, the pathway in the brain gets stronger and stronger.
Sure.
Right. And training a memory, that's what that does as well. So you're creating stronger pathways. Yeah.
So it allows you to, because the reason I asked that is because I see like habit as like a physical memory kind of thing, like people keep repeating the same tasks because it's a habitual kind of thing. But is that related to memory? So if you have are better trained, or if you work harder on your memory, you'll find it easier to break those habits?
It's a really good question. I haven't really delved too much into it, to be honest, because someone like me, I don't have any habits whatsoever. Because a lot of people think, oh, look at the successful people, they have all these habits, they have their morning habits. And, I've always been, talking about habits with people, because they always interview me and say, oh, what are your habits like? And we want to know, and give us your top 7 things. I'm like, I've got no habits. Every single day is different.
Why? What do you think that is?
I don't know.
You can say, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, because every day I have different clients. Sometimes I have none. Sometimes out traveling the country. So every day is different for me.
Yeah.
I might have a habit of getting out and having a shower or brushing the teeth, but that doesn't happen.
I think that's routine.
The same.
Habit.
That's more routine.
Different?
Yeah, that's right. So I've got routines like that, but not necessarily habits, if that makes sense.
So I'm leading into the habit kind of thing, because I want to know if you can memorize a bad habit.
Memorize a bad habit. Like what would you like to achieve with a bad habit?
So going back to something that we were talking about earlier, about not being able to memorize through repetition. So this is all for all the actors out there that want to learn the best way to memorize the dialogue if they have an audition coming up. I know this sounds very sort of niche and targeted to a specific audience, but actors spend a lot of time. I used to do this as well when I was younger and starting out. I would spend a lot of time memorizing dialogue. And the way that I memorize dialogue is that I would pick up a script, whether it was for an audition or maybe I was doing a play or something like that, and I would go through the lines, and I'd read the lines, and I'd read them again, I'd say them out loud, I'd think about it, and I'd go, if I could get, I'd memorize maybe half a dozen or a page or 2 pages, and then I'd put it down, try to do it, pick it back up, and then read it again, and if I could trip up on a word, okay, I forget that, so go back and look at it. And so what you were saying to me about through repetition is that's a really poor way of learning.
Absolutely.
Because I wasn't sort of taught how to learn lines. And I mean, the way I do it now is completely different to how I used to do it. Now I can pick up a scene and I can get it in 2 reads, 3 reads, and the thing's pretty much down, 4 reads and I'm good. But what can people do, and what is it that they're doing? First of all, what's the mistake that they're making in doing that, and through the repetition, and why is that bad? And then how can they improve it?
Well, the repetition's bad because it takes so long, and sometimes you can repeat something for so long and still forget it, right? Because there's no holding spot. Now, the opposite of that is using memory techniques, and when you're using memory techniques, you're creating holding spots, so when you put information in there, it just gets retrieved. Now, I work a lot with actors, right? I've done a lot of work, and they've brought in whole scripts, and they've literally memorized 5-10 page scripts in about an hour, 2 hours tops, word for word, and even other people's parts as well, using these things. Now, it's a massive difference. If I was to use repetition for memorizing the phone book, right, I probably wouldn't remember more than 3 digits. That's how terrible my repetition memory is, right? And I've tested this out many times, right? But I used memory techniques, and I was able to memorize over 20,000 digits in 24 days, right, for the 2 yellow pages phone books. Now, that's the difference between using memory techniques versus just using repetition.
Right on. So what are they? So how do they go about? So because a lot of people will memorize a script but keep tripping up on the same section. Is that memorizing a bad habit, or is that just poor memory?
It's not really poor memory. It's just using repetition once again, because it's not an effective way of remembering. Whereas if you use memory techniques, if you trip up on a certain area, you're going to know how to correct it straight away and then move along to the next thing.
Right, okay.
So instead of spending ages trying to fix that one thing, which might be tripping you up for so long, you've got that ability now to say, okay, this is an issue. I'm just going to do this and then move along.
Sure.
So you're saving a lot of time using memory techniques.
So what can people, what can those actors out there start trying to do to to fix that? What's some of the steps that they can sort of take?
I guess there's a lot of techniques out there, and one technique I'd sort of recommend is what's called a memory palace.
Sounds wonderful.
It sounds like it's the in term for that, method of loci, because that's what the ancient Greeks called, but it's not sexy enough now, so they've called it memory palace. And so you use something like a memory palace, and what you do is a memory palace is essentially it's called a route. You're moving through certain areas and you're attaching items to be remembered in those areas. So for example, you go into your house and the first thing you see is a door, right? Mm-hmm. Then next thing I might see is I've got a bedroom, so I might say your bed. Then I might say, my dressing area, sure. Might say, couch, whatever. So I'm just going through a familiar route, and then what I'm doing is I'm attaching things to remember. So let's say I've got to do an introduction, right? This is the scene. So I connect introduction to door. So I knock on the door and introduce myself, right? Yeah. The next thing might be I have to run up the stairs, right? In the actual scene. So I'm in my bed now, and I've pictured myself running upstairs on the bed, and I've got this flight of stairs. I've popped that on the bed. It's bouncing up and down. I'm running on it like an idiot. Sure. Right? So I'm just making these silly stories up. And what that does is when you go through each location and memorize, then all you have to do is go to the front door. What was happening at the front door? Do you remember?
No.
What I did. So it was the introduction. I was introducing myself at the front door, right? Sure. Then I went on the bed, and what was happening on the bed?
I want to say you were jumping up on the bed, but that's not right.
It was the stairs.
Stairs, I was close. Elevation, I was close.
Yeah. So elevate, obviously we're doing it really quickly, sure. But if you spend a bit of time and really visualize and make the connection, you'll get everything, pretty much perfectly. So that technique is really good. But again, it all comes down to visualization and trying to understand, how does that look? How does that feel? So when you're doing the scripts now, how you said you get it in 2-3 reads, that's most likely because you can really experience yourself in there.
Well, what I do now is the moment I get it, I do it. So I don't just sit there and read it anymore. I actually get up and walk around and do it and speak it out
So it's
loud.
the experience, and that's as soon as you start feeling the emotion, that's at a higher level of memory now. If you just visualize it, okay, that's one step there. But if you just repeat it, that's not really getting anywhere. So the experiences, that's what we remember the most.
Sure.
The feeling. So as soon as you attach a feeling to a memory, that it goes to a higher level. So it's not just brain based; it's heart based. Right, and if you combine them together, the brain and heart, you can do amazing things.
That's crazy. So aside from just contacting someone like you, specifically you at the moment, that's probably the best thing they can do is just start emotionally connecting to the script, properly getting up and doing it, not just thinking about the emotion, but legitimately feeling it, where they're sort of going with it.
You know what's funny? A lot of my clients, when we do speed reading, I get them to read terms and conditions, right? The most boring, dry stuff they can think of. And I say, okay, now make it emotional, right? Really visualize. And I'm like, how the hell do I make this stuff emotional? Anyway, once we start training and working on it, it's almost like they're about to cry, and they from reading terms and conditions, and they remember everything.
That's amazing.
It's I signed a contract, it's no, I'm about to break here. Why am I signing this contract? So you got to add feeling. So it's almost, actors will be really good at this stuff, right?
You think they are. You hope they are.
You'd hope they are, but it's one of those things where you just put, you make it fun. You make it fun. I think that's, we all want to have fun. So that's another point that using memory training helps, because now you're enjoying the process rather than, you have to repeat this stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, because I didn't think it was possible, and now that I know that there's techniques, it's like I'm obligated now, to get this message out there. Sure. And for me, it's rewarding to see people succeed, and that just spurs you on more and spurs you on more, and 17 years later, here I am. I never thought I'd even be talking to you today about this stuff.
Pinch yourself.
Yeah, but. Pinch myself. Yeah. No, not really. I mean, it's almost like you have a mission to just help as many people as you can. Sure. You really care about or think about yourself. You don't look at the achievements, or that doesn't really mean anything for me. The biggest achievement for me is seeing someone improve, right? Seeing someone's life change. That's like the greatest thing ever. People come to me and say, look, Tansel, I've had brain damage. I just can't remember anything. Can you help me? And 6 sessions later, these people are memorizing more than what I can.
That's amazing.
Their doctors couldn't help them and whatever. They had parts of their brain missing, and they're still able to do it because of this imagination component, right? So, and then there's people that are coming to me, they're crying because of, they weren't taught how to do A, B, C, and D, and they've been trying for years just to pass an exam. Like I had one guy come last year, he had to pass the world's hardest exam. It was a sommelier exam, the wine tasting. And there's 3 components, and he had, for 7 years he's been trying, and he only had like 2 months to actually prepare for it.
He would have been stressed.
And he was an awesome guy, really, amazing individual. And in 1 month, we got him to memorize his whole book, all of his notes. He memorized it, right? And it's in different languages too, by the way. There's Italian, there's French, there's German. He memorized everything, all the wines, all the grapes. I mean, it's the most intense thing I've ever seen in my life. And then he had the second month to just go over his work and just review, make the stories stronger. And then, he goes to Austria to sit the exam. There's only been passed by 200 odd people since 1977, right? So, and there's lots and lots of people sitting this exam. And anyway, I get a text message from him saying he's the only one that passed, after he sat the exam. So I'm like, wow, it's not me. It's more like, here's what you have to do. Make sure you put the effort in. And he went ahead and did it. And because he knew that the power of memory techniques were going to help him. Yeah, and it did.
On memorizing, like, I think there's is there this may sound like a really silly question, but when you learn something and memorize something, is that the same as the knowledge?
Yeah, it's a question I get asked a lot. Is memory really learning, right? It's very, very common that this question comes up, because you think, well, I can memorize something but not necessarily know it.
Understanding
because that's what schooling is, right? We're trained to recall at the end, right, for the exam.
I think it's a poor way to learn.
It's an extremely poor way to learn, right? Because what happens is that we're setting ourselves up. Yes, we got all that knowledge just to pass an exam. After that, how much do you remember? Barely anything, right? I went and did, a degree, and, the exams came. I mean, I flunked it many times, but this was before I knew memory. But after that, I mean, I had no idea of what we did. I had inklings in there, but, someone give me a model for fixing whatever, or I'm like, no idea, right? Sure. So I went back and did studies again once I learned all these memory techniques, and, I went back and did 2 master's degrees, and, appreciated learning a lot more. And it wasn't just about memorizing now. Like, you can memorize information, but it's about, okay, how do I learn from that? How do I extract that information so that my brain is not just getting it for recall, it's getting it for understanding, it's getting it for questioning, it's getting it for reflection. Like, how do you actually learn, right? So they're the type of things that you start looking at. And they only come about once you get that information in your head quickly, right? And that's where that encoding process comes in.
Okay.
So once you can encode a lot quicker, then you've got more time to actually start thinking and dealing with the content, right? So there's really, really powerful ways of learning using memory techniques for not just necessarily memorizing, but for really analyzing the learning. And, it's also good, and this is what people don't realize as well for learning, is that we're not conditioned to fail, right? It's like you have to pass. Failure is where you start learning a lot as well, because you start to analyze and see where you've gone wrong, right? So with memory, what happens is that when you first start off, you go through some failures, but what that happens is you start analyzing what's going on, and through that analysis process, you're getting the learning, you're getting that, okay, this is what's happening. And it's like almost a light bulb moment is, oh wow, this is why memory technique's so powerful, because now it's enabling me to learn. And
they're all probably, and they're feeling more passionate about what it is they're trying to understand as well. So that's increasing, which is increasing the amount of knowledge that they're learning.
It can be. I mean, you can take the most boring, mundane subject, right? Subjects you just don't even like, because at when you're studying wherever it is, you sometimes just go through that, right? I had accounting. I'm like, oh, dude,
what am I doing?
What am I doing with accounting? This was one of the MBA subjects I did, because everything else was just talk. Accounting was like all numbers. I'm like, anyway, I'm like, okay, how can I make this memorable, right? So that was the first question that came into my head. Not how can I remember this, right? Because that's what we do as students. How can I remember this? Because in the exam, this is what they're testing us on, right? So for me, it's like I need to understand what's going on.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
How can I understand what's going on? Everyone asks that question generally, but it's the next bit, like, how do I do it? Using the skills.
As in, like, how do I apply it?
How do I apply it? And, you could learn anything in a very, very short space of time, right? You can learn languages in months. You can learn, the accounting in months. Like, you can do things really quickly by just sheer knowledge of how to use these skills. So, for example, I spent a year with Melbourne University and PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to develop a language learning program. Right? And when you look at how language is learnt these days, you go to like a course or seminar or program, whatever it is, they give you all these workbooks, and you go through all the grammar and, the vowels and, all that sort of stuff, right? But you don't necessarily learn how to fully speak or fully understand the language, right? So you don't go overseas and take your workbook, right, and speak to people, right? It just doesn't work that way. It
reminds me of did you ever watch the National Lampoons?
Yeah.
Did you see the one where they went to Europe? And oh god, what's his name? He's walking around the streets of France with a one of those. It looks like a calculator, and you have to type in the word.
We used to have those,
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah. So you don't go overseas with that stuff, right? No. You go with a phrase book.
Sure.
You go with a phrase book. So a phrase is in context, right? So there's a lot of people out there doing the wrong thing. Essentially, when they're trying to learn language, they're memorizing words. Right? And it's like there's thousands of words, and a word is out of context, right?
Sure.
But if you memorize a phrase, it's in context, right? And if you memorize a certain amount of phrases in any language, right, it's about 1,500, you'll be able to speak it, right?
So 1,500 phrases.
Yeah, that's right.
Coupled up of what, like, say 160 words, 180 words.
So
coupled with because those 1,500 phrases are made up of, say, like 160 words or 200 words. Yeah,
it's something like that. But yeah, it's more about understanding, okay, how can I say something? How can I learn that? How can I learn to say, how do you get to such and such place? Or where's the bathroom?
Sure.
That's in context, So we work that out, because when you learn a language as a kid, right, your parents are just speaking to you, right, in the phrases. They're not just giving you one word. Yeah, maybe as a baby, but even that is like, don't bloody do that.
Yeah, sure.
And we get the bloody in there before we even get mum and daddy, in the Aussie culture anyway. So we learn in phrases, and the difference is our parents speak to us over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like almost like muscle memory. After hearing it so many times, we get it.
But
right?
they're coupling that repetition with an action.
Yeah.
Like, don't bloody touch that. So
exactly. And they're doing it over and over and over again, right? So it sticks. Now, as adults, we can learn a language, but instead of repeating it over and over again, we have memory techniques. So instead of going through hundreds of repetitions, you might have to go through it a few times and you get it. So what's the difference now? It's time.
How do you mean?
It's time. So instead of repeating, the time's a difference, because it might take you ages to get something after hundreds of repetitions.
Sure.
Whereas if you just look at a sentence, you apply techniques, you might just go through it a couple more times and you've got it.
Right.
So you've saved yourself all that time. Right? So that's how you can essentially learn a language within months, because now you've got memory techniques. You memorize those phrases.
Yeah.
Those phrases are stored in your head, and it's just a matter of time until you get through X amount and you've got it. You can actually listen to people and start understanding them.
And once you work on those phrases and those techniques, are you less likely to lose that language? Because like, say you don't use it for 6 months, or say even 2 months, right? And you don't even revisit it. Is it easier to come back to?
It is, because you've got storage spots in your head. Now, the problem is still, though, is you still need to go back and review. Right? There's a thing called spaced repetition where, if you memorize something, you have to go back to it, say a couple of hours later just to revisit. And then it's 24 hours later, a week later, 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, and it just sort of doubles from there, right? And by the time you get into the months, it's stuck in your head.
Sure.
Right, so doing that will allow you to really understand and learn and retain that information for long term.
Sure. Can you? I think this is completely unrelated, but I remember talking to people recently about memory in the courthouse procedure process, and a lot of cases being either won or lost because of false memory. Is that bad memory, or is it just bad recall when that happens?
Oh, it could be so many factors, because remember, people are, that could be stress, they could have anxiety, and suddenly imagine something totally different that they've got.
Sure.
So they've actually created a false memory.
Yeah.
Right? Get that a lot with my daughter, and my kids. It's like, did you, have a shower? Yeah, I'm sure I did. Yeah. I was like, no, you haven't. Yeah. So it happens, and people aren't really conscious of it. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but in order to get around that, the memory techniques actually help, because you're relating it back to a holding spot in your brain, and all you have to do is go back to that trigger point and go, oh yeah, this is exactly what happened.
Sure.
It's definitely not, I definitely had a shower.
Did you definitely have a shower? I swear to God I did. And then you've also written this amazing little book. This is not your first book either, is it?
That's my first one. I've got another one after that. That's called The Yellow Elephant.
Sorry, the other one I was looking at was the How to Learn Anything. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, almost anything.
Yeah, it's a terrible title, but
why did you?
It wasn't my fault. Yeah, they blame the publisher, so hopefully they're not listening. I had to convince them for Yellow Elephant. They're like, how the hell are we going to market this? Tansel, this is not right. So I had to think of something straight away. I'm like, shit, what can I do? Right? And I thought, okay, Yellow Elephant. Okay, here's how we're going to do it, right? Because memory works with creating images and stories, right? If I said, 1001 ways to blah, 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 no one's going to remember the title. But if I give an image straight up, people will remember the yellow elephant, right? So we're using memory techniques in the title of the book, and they love the idea. I'm like, oh, thank God, I
can pitch a title of a book.
Yeah, because really the reason why I came up with it was I memorized the Yellow Pages phone book, and
that's what I thought
is for memory, right?
Yeah.
They didn't like that. Yeah, and they didn't like that idea.
I thought the elephant was like the elephant in the room.
No,
as in the issue.
Yeah, no, it's not really a issue book. But,
I don't know. I think that not that it's an issue book, but it's definitely a solution for a problem book.
Yeah, it's just not deeply rooted in that book. They the publisher just wanted something like just make a how-to book. Don't even put your character in there, type of thing. So it's like, okay, like I wanted to write a story for my book because people engage better with stories. So I wanted to write my book almost like a fiction, but with actual techniques in there.
Is that what you're going to do next?
Definitely.
Because you've written 2 how-to books now, haven't you?
Yeah. And look, I try to put my own character in there, so there are some dad jokey type things and whatnot.
Great, I love it.
And a lot of Aussie things in there. So I've had to rewrite my book for the US market. Yeah. When it was being sold there. So all my AFL stats and all. I had to put baseball in there and gridiron and get rid of some, Aussie lingo. But it's really interesting how that sort of came about. Yeah.
It's amazing. I think it's really cool. I think it's such a, me personally, I think that memory is such a function that people just don't. I don't even think they take it for granted because I just don't think they value it.
Yeah, and I think, look, the biggest thing now is dementia and, Alzheimer's and all that sort of stuff.
Like when people losing memory, is this what do you think that's linked to?
Look, I haven't done any research or anything like that. I know that a lot of stuff's being done. I mean, my grandmother's got Alzheimer's. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Just seeing people suffer like that. And when she was sort of at the start of her journey in Alzheimer's, when she knew who I was, I went through some techniques with her and she remembered everything perfectly. Right.
Then would she forget it again?
Yeah, she would, because of what's going on, I guess, physiologically in the brain. But, it is an area I'd love to delve further into and even work with some people and see what's going on. Because if they've got an imagination, who knows what they might be able to do with this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
that's what my grandfather suffered from that as well.
Yeah, it's terrible. But, I'm looking more in terms of prevention. right? What can you do to prevent this sort of stuff? And research does show that training your brain does sort of help out in this way, but to what extent, what exactly you have to do. Training with this, the way that I sort of help people and the way that's written in the books is that's definitely the best way of learning how to encode data and training your brain that way. It's like going to the gym and doing like high intensity exercises and really getting to the core of improving. And I found like my memory is getting better and better every year.
Really?
Every year. And I wouldn't have thought so, because I start off with a terrible memory in my teens, and all of a sudden, like, I'm in my 40s now, and I find that my memory is a lot better. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Like, people say, but you're the memory guy. Like, no, I'm just a human being, right? And I've seen this for myself, and I've seen other people that I've trained for over the years. They're getting better and better and better. So it's a trained thing, and if you don't train it, then it's going to get worse.
Right on.
So it's not like physical body. Like, once you get older, you start to see sagging and all that sort of stuff. But you don't see your brain sagging or anything like that. You can actually get a lot more powerful. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I can 100% agree with you that I just think that memory, it's, like I said, I'm rehashing, but it's one of the most important assets that I think human beings have. Like, not just on an instinct level that I was talking about earlier, but I'm a face-to-face value level. Like, there's like technologies coming out that are minimizing, well, it's one way of looking at it, minimizing or maximizing our knowledge base, because we have a closer connection to like the internet, for example. But I remember there's like someone said to me, like, people say it all the time, like, with Google now you can Google anything, but the problem with Google versus like an encyclopedia, you have to know what you're looking for. With Google, you can't just like Google anything and find anything. Like, we're an encyclopedia, you can just turn to a page and learn something new. Google, you have to sort of know what you're looking for. And I think that's like a downfall of technology, and you don't see the context around it. No.
And that's what I used to have this same question when I was a kid, because I used to look at computers, and then they started getting CD-ROMs for encyclopedias, and I used to read encyclopedias a lot when I was a kid. So there was just fascinating stuff in there. My cousin had the whole Britannica, just underneath her TV cabinet.
Amazing.
We used to just love going through them. Then I had more colourful ones. Some salesperson came into our milk bar and sold us this set, and I just kept reading them. It was the best thing ever. Learned a lot about life. But what happened was that I'd open up a chapter or area, and you can just flick through and get a really good scenario of what's going on.
I agree.
Whereas online, you just get that website. So when I put the CD-ROM in with the encyclopedia, I'm like, I just got that one thing. I'm like, hang on, it's not giving me what I really want, what I miss. Right, so it's the same with human connection on the internet.
Sure, okay.
Right, so you go onto social media, you might see just one thing or just a feed of people. You don't see a group of people, a connection, right? Whereas before, you go into a social setting, you see people all around, the different types of people, right? So it's almost like doing the same thing.
Sure, okay,
right,
sure.
In a social setting as well. So it's about trying to bring back that context of, okay, how can we, get into in real life? Like, one of my mentees at the moment, she did something extraordinary, according to everyone. She just went viral in the news and everything. And what she did was she met up with 100 strangers for lunch.
Kaylee.
Yeah, Kaylee. Yeah. So she met 100 strangers for lunch. Now, how awesome this is that in this day and age, whoever's got 100 followers, like, oh, what's that? People wanting thousands of followers, for things like that. But how well do they actually know that person, or what's the actual connection, right?
I meant to she messaged me, oh God, I think last year or the year before, and she's like, can we catch up for lunch as part of the thing that she's doing? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to, but I feel so shit about it, because I meant to catch up with her, and we planned like different dates, and I just had to keep cancelling on it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's good to see the progress as well, because it's that human connection. It's the human connection is just so important, and that's what I guess people generally don't see out there. Like, a lot of people know about it, obviously, but it's just about going ahead and doing it and meeting people and building that connection, because that's what memory is. Memory is connection. Right?
That's interesting.
Memory is connection. When you think of memory words, look at connection, look at community, look at social relationships. Like, if you're not connected in a relationship, you're far apart, right? That's not connected. If you're together, right? You're touching, you're kissing, whatever. That's connection, right? That's how memory works. You have to connect. You have to associate, and once you know how to do that, then you start looking at things a bit deeper and go, okay, how can I connect people together? How can I connect certain things, environment and politics and whatnot? How's this actually fitting together? That's what really memory is. And once you understand this on a deeper level, then you go, wow, this is why we need to train our memory. Not because of remembering,
where you
list
left
of
your
digits
wallet.
or where you left your wallet, but thinking of all these other questions of, shit, how can we connect society? How can we make it better functioning instead of,
It's one of the saddest things that I see now. Like, I've just noticed it on the last, 3 years or 5 years is, and I think a lot of people pick up on this, but when you walk down the street, you go down, like, say, to Graves or wherever you go, and all you see is like cafe tables out, and there's people catching up with each other, but they're just on their bloody phones. They're not even connecting, and I think people are losing that ability to connect with each other. Absolutely.
And look, there's so many things you can do as well. Obviously, it's not, phones are good. They're tools, and it's great. I'm not saying that technology is bad or anything. I love technology. I love phones. I love everything.
It's important because it helps you get a message out, like what it's helping us do right now.
I just like how it looks and feels, and I like all of that stuff. I was born a technology nerd ever since when I was born, I guess. So I was going to say ever since I was 9, but I was born. You can cut that bit out. So I love technology, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to be mindful. I think that's probably the most important thing. If
being
you're
present.
meeting with someone, it's like, well, two people looking at their phones in front of each other, you sort of just ask yourself, is that, what am I really doing here? Are you just taking photos of your food, or are you just sending a quick message, or do you just put it away and communicate? There's no real right or wrong answer, but it's what you feel from it, I believe.
I think that's a scary question for people, though. What am I really doing here? Like, if there were people to start thinking about that, like they're sitting there in front of, like, say we were catching up for coffee, and then I've got my phone out texting away, and you've got your phone out, and then all of a sudden I'm like, fuck, what am I really doing here? That's a really scary, confronting question for people to ask, because you can look at that at surface level and say, I'm just texting, or it's a quick message that I'm sending, but you could also look at it at a deeper level, like, what am I actually doing here? Like, catching up with this person, and, do I actually have a strong connection with this person?
That's right. And if you're texting while you're with someone, that means there's some sort of disconnect happening. It could be minute. There's that disconnect. That person could be talking, right, and you're
it's frightening, though.
It happens. It happens in couples. With my wife as well. Like, these things happen. It's all about let's be present. We can talk about it. We're in a conversation, right? You can talk about it with people and see, okay, what's going to work. You set boundaries. Say, okay, maybe we'll use our phones, when we're walking or whatever. So you set little things. People can do whatever they want at the end of the day, but it's just about, what does it do for them at the end of the day? What are they getting out of it? Because, they could be totally distracted, not care about other people, live their life, and they're happy. That's great. But, what is it really leading to? I guess that's the more important question, because I don't have an issue if people are just totally staring into their phones and not doing anything, right? It's not impacting me, but how's it impacting them? So that's what I try and look at is, are they getting into a more negative environment? Is it worsening their careers? If it's making their life better, then go ahead and do it. Then, why not? Go ahead and do it. But if it's making their life worse, then that's something we've got to sort of, I guess, look at as a collective.
Sure.
And the big thing was, just recently, they banned mobile phones from schools.
Has that happened?
Yeah, so from next year onwards, I think primary and secondary students aren't allowed to use their phones. They'd have to put them in lockers.
That's me clapping. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, to be honest, like I said, I love phones, I love technology, I think they're great tools, but I love the idea of putting your phones away.
Yeah.
Because now, right, I'm not saying it's bad to not have a phone in class, but here's what it does from a memory perspective, right?
Sure.
If you've got a teacher talking, if you've got, you're writing notes, you're on the phone, you're doing other work on your phone, this is happening, that. It's just one extra thing for your brain to take in.
Another distraction.
The trick is, I mean, distraction, yes, but it could be assisting you as well. But you don't need 10 assisting things, right? You need focus, and focus only works when you're just concentrated into one specific area, right? If there was no phones, that's one less thing to worry about. One less thing to worry about, right? And that's fantastic. Now, if you can reduce other things, that's other things to worry about as well.
Sure.
Right? So that's how I look at it. I look at it from an efficiency point of view. Right? Yes, you can do, I mean, there's not really such thing as multitasking, I guess, but, you know, people do one thing after the other very, very quickly and think it's multitasking. But, you know, I wouldn't necessarily see it as a multitasking tool for phones. But it's more about how can I be concentrated in that one moment, in that one time. Yeah, and that to me is the best form of learning, because you're putting your full energy into it, your full concentration and effort.
That's a powerful message. Is there, speaking on that, we're just clicked over the hour mark. Is there anything that you want to, like, is there any message that you want to, aside from the incredible stuff that I've learnt personally and hopefully other people?
We haven't even touched the surface.
No,
it's so
frightening. Like, I just have so much, I could but is there any, like, sort of message, or is anything that you want to say as well, like, to leave this note on?
I mean, I always sort of say this to people, is that just look, if you think you've got a bad memory, or, you know, something's not quite right in your mind, and you're telling yourself negative stories, you say, look, I can't do this, I can't do that, whatever, I'm not getting any work from acting or whatever it is. You know, there's always tools and techniques to help you out there, right? Everything is out there. Like, we're not in the information age anymore. Information's there. We get it straight away. We can ask Siri. The trick is what to do with that information, right?
Sure. So how to apply it.
How to apply it. So that's why I do what I do, so I can show people how to apply it. If people come to me saying, I want to know techniques to blah, 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 I say, here, read this book, or here's this technique. So I give it to them for free, right? Because it's all out there. But if they say, I want to change my life, I want to do this, blah, 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 that's when I sort of go through, give them programs. So there's always something, there's always people out there that'll help. Go have lunch with people that are already there, right? Like we spoke about Kaylee. She got some amazing results just from that. So instead of following people online and hoping for the best, you know, go and meet with people. I can guarantee you that one meaningful conversation, you'll get more out of that than following 1,000 people. You know, it's really, really powerful. So I guess the takeaway from all of this is just go out and seek methods to better yourself. And the more you seek, the more you fight for it, the more you try and look for, the more avenues and things will open up, because you're looking for it, right? I was looking to better myself, and, you know, all these other people started showing up, not just books and resources, but people. And that's where I got, you know, motivated, and that's how I got my successes.
Well, your opportunities.
And opportunities, it just came naturally. You know, I wasn't searching for them, because I was already on that road, right? So, and I don't see myself as someone special or someone that's, you know, really worked hard for what I do. Yeah, I did put a bit of effort, but you know, it just came naturally, because I was just naturally curious and seeking.
Sure.
So that's what happens. I mean, that's the real brain hack, is you don't have to have strong willpower. You don't have to have self-discipline. You just have to put yourself in the right environment, and that naturally happens. Yeah.
Well, that's you're a hell of a human being. You're very inspirational, I've got to say.
Cool.
And I'm sure you
Thanks,
get told
man.
that a lot. But you've got a bit of a fan of me now, and I feel fully stoked to have met you and sat down and have this conversation with you. And I really hope that people get to listen to this podcast, like, get something fully out of it, because I think it's a wonderful message that you've got. And I think that, I think there's just a lot in there, you know. So I want to say thank you genuinely for catching up with me and taking time to sit down and chat and talk about your story and your experiences. And I'd love to do it again in the future. And you're a hell of a dude.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Sorry, Kieran.
How many times do you do that?
I do it a lot now, but yeah, I do appreciate it. Thank you, and keep doing what you're doing as well, because you're getting messages out there, and you're doing amazing. And this is so like podcasting and listening. It's a form of it's not it's passive, so people really tune in and listen, and people have. It's a visual medium. It's not all auditory, because people listen in with their emotions.
Yeah.
Right. So
I agree with you.
And I first heard that on radio. I was listening because I listen to SEN a lot and footy and stuff, and they say, oh, this is a visual medium. I was like, no, it isn't. It's auditory. But when I thought about it, is once you start getting emotions involved and you're describing things and you're telling stories, you're just
seeing it.
You're seeing it in your mind. And what that does is when people tune into podcasts and they really feel it, and they get massive engagement. So much better than say writing a post online or whatever. You're having these deep and meaningful conversations. So really do appreciate what you're doing as well. So yeah, thank you.
We didn't even get into music. Oh my god, we didn't even get there. You're a massive music
The funny thing is, all these podcasts that we do, there always ends up being a part 2. So who knows, maybe down the track.
I'd love to just chat with just general crap with you.
Cool.
You're an easy dude to talk to. You've got a great voice too.
Crap is good.
Yeah, so handshake.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you.
Peace. Alright, cool. So first of all, thank you guys for listening. Big ups. Thank you to Tansel Ali for having me at his office. It was really cool. So all the noise and stuff in the background, that's what's going on there. We're not in an airport, we're in an office. Thanks for the chat, Tansel. It was great. Thanks for being a really sick guest. Yes, I cannot wait to have you back on. As always, please subscribe, like the show if you like the show, show the appreciation of the sport. I appreciate it, so that's sick. Until then, there's more guests coming up. Stay cool, be peaceful, and I'll chat to you later. Ava.